that good stuff. So, Dad, why don't you tell us about first time you remember a piano in your life?
My dad traded an acoustic guitar for an upright piano when I was about 5 or 6, 7, and I started not too long after that. He got me hooked up with the church organist, piano player, and I started taking lessons from her for about a year, and then he started giving me lessons. About a year after he decided that he could give me lessons as well as she could, I guess. And he did. He gave us lessons, all of us kids. How long did I take lessons till I started beginning band in the 5th or 6th grade, I guess.
And then you started playing trombone.
And then I started playing trombone, so I probably had more performances on trombone. Before I had keyboard performances, because I was marching with the high school band in the 7th and 8th grade. Not halftime shows, but parades and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then maybe by the time I was 13 or 14, I was started playing in church, playing keyboards, piano, or organ. It was organ back then. And Dad had a gospel quartet that was starting up around that time when I was about a freshman in high school.
Is that the Brotherhood Quartet?
The Brotherhood Quartet. And that would have been some of my first performances outside of we performed in churches. So I mainly performed at church. There was probably some high school stuff by the time I was 15 or 16. Where I bought my first organ and started playing a little combo for high school sock ops. And
what was that called?
What was that band called? Billy Wayne Bateman was in it. The 7th Cav, maybe.
And what kind of tunes would you guys be playing?
Proud Mary and Heat Wave and Mustang Sally and but I think one of the first performances I ever did with that band for a high school sock op, we had to go borrow an organ because I didn't have a portable keyboard at that time. And at some point when I was a junior or senior in high school, I bought or my parents probably bought it for me, a Farfisa mini compact organ. And not too long after that, I got a Leslie to go with it. A Leslie 147 RV, which I wish I still had, but I wouldn't be able to haul it around. So yeah, those are.
So then so that was your right before college. So then, did you audition anywhere else besides Austin P, or was that the only place you auditioned?
I didn't really want to go anywhere else because my high school band directors were Austin P graduates, and they started taking me to the Mid-South Jazz Festival when I was a freshman in high school. And back then, Austin P's jazz band they were just awesome. I think the first or second year I saw them, they had Clark Terry from the Tonight Show band, which back in those days it would have been Doc Severinsen's, had a big band on the Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson was the host, and Ed McMahon was the assistant host or Johnny's sidekick, and so we they had Clark Terry. He was one of their lead trumpet players from the Tonight Show band. He was a guest clinician at Austin Peay that year, and he played with Austin Peay's jazz band. And Austin Peay had their lead trumpet player that year. I thought blew Clark Terry off the stage, and you know, I just decided by the time I was a junior or senior that I wanted to play in that jazz band. And so when I was a senior in high school, my band director, Billy Wayne Bateman, wanted me to work up Chopin's Polonaise in A major, which was a classical piece. So I learned it and memorized it and went and played it for an audition and got a music scholarship to Austin Peay. And
is that when your dad weighted the keys down so it'd be harder to play?
Maybe.
That might just be a legend.
Did somebody tell you that?
Somebody told me that.
Yeah, that might have happened. He would probably remember that. Let's call him.
So like when you were in college, I mean, you were also in the jazz band, but you also started some bands with some of your schoolmates, right? Some of your classmates.
Yeah, when I was a sophomore, my Billy Wayne Bateman came back. He was my junior, senior high school band director. And we played, well, he was in the Brotherhood Quartet. He was a lead guitar player in the Brotherhood Quartet. And then I know we played my junior and senior year. And, I mean, it was mainly around Jamestown for school things and maybe at the country club, a few things like that. And because there really wasn't that many places to play around Jamestown. And where was I?
You were talking about like the bands that you were in outside of the jazz band, like bands you would have been in with your friends.
Back to college.
Yeah, yeah.
So my sophomore year, Billy Wayne comes back to get his master's degree at Austin Peay. And we started another group called the Billy Wayne Bateman and the Sweet Memory Show Band. So that was me and Jeff Sletzer, who is now band director. Is he still band director at Father Run?
Well, yeah, for a long time, but who else?
Eric Scales on sax and guitar. Jeff was a drummer, and Wendell Peavyhouse was the bass player. He was from Jamestown. He and I went to high school together. In college, we were music majors at Austin Peay, and he went on to be actually band director back at York Institute, where we graduated high school.
So, and then you started going on the road with another band a couple years later.
Yeah, but I'd pretty much finished up my everything for my music degree except my senior recital. And I think it was August of 1977 I got asked to go on the road with the Vogues, and I took off and did that for a year because I was out of money and kind of tired of going to school and wanted to play, and so I took off and did that for a year, and then I came back to Austin Peay because the jazz band director wanted us to come back, especially wanted me to come back because he knew I didn't like a lot finishing up my degree, and also he wanted us to play in the jazz band, and we were going to go to Europe, which we didn't wind up going. but we did play in the jazz band, and there was by then there was a couple guys that were playing with the Vogues that they went back to Austin P too, and worked on their degrees, and me and the bass player played in the jazz band for a whole year, and then we went back out with the Vogues again, and I still hadn't finished up my degree. And then we came back. We came back to Austin P again, so I finally finished up.
So you'd go on the road, go back to school, go back on the road, go back to school.
I mean, at that time, you know, I needed to go back out and make some money so I could afford to come back to school.
Right.
Because I was out of scholarship money and financial aid. Or
so you finally play your recital. What did you end up playing? Do you remember?
Yes, I think I do. A Bach toccata in E minor, a Chopin nocturne, Shostakovich, and a Bartok, maybe.
So where do the white balls fit in all this? When does that start? Is that after college?
The white balls, yeah.
So you graduated, and then is that when that started, or you
no,
still doing
when
the Vogues?
the white balls started, could have started when we would come back in, and we'd be hanging out in Clarksville, and not on the road with the Vogues. 79 or 80, because I had not finished up my degree at Austin P when the white balls started. And we finally finished up our first album project in 80 or 81, and we had to record it on a 4-track. And we were playing during the summer of 81, maybe 80 and 81. And we seemed like we were rehearsing, or our drummer had to go on the road with Bob Mummert. Wasn't going to be able to play some dates that the White Balls had, so we were trying to, Marshall Pearson came over and played with us. We were thinking about trying to get him to fill in for Bob Mummert with the White Balls. And after that rehearsal that day, Marshall got called by Jackie Cook, and Jackie was saying that Roy Orbison needed a drummer and a keyboard player. And so Marshall says, "Hey Turbo, wanna go play with Roy Orbison?"
He said you weren't like super familiar with Roy's material at that time.
Well, of course, I'd heard, there were songs like "Pretty Woman" and "Crying."
But he had to bring those up, right? Like, they didn't come to mind immediately. You said he had to tell you a couple songs, and you're like, "Oh yeah, that's that guy."
Yeah. So after he mentioned a couple songs like "Pretty Woman," I was going, "Oh yeah."
So what was that audition like with Roy?
I didn't have to audition. They took Marshall's word for it, and I guess the first gig I did was an audition, maybe. And
where was that?
Alberta, Edmonton, up in Canada, Edmonton, Alberta, somewhere up in there.
Was it just a one-off, or were y'all touring?
No, it might have been a weekend thing, maybe 1 or 2 dates up there.
And they were
maybe a 2 or 3 day weekend. And
Roy say anything to you after you played, or somebody else let you know that it was all right? I guess.
Actually, Roy had given me, because I had a sore throat or something, and he had given me one of his pain pills or something, so I wasn't exactly, I wasn't, I was a little bit out of it when I played the first show with him. I didn't feel like I did that great, but I guess it was good enough. I think it got better the next show, and
nice. So
I think I did a rehearsal or two before we went and did that gig in Canada too. So, but it seemed like I had some unfamiliar equipment that I was trying to play his string parts on, and it was okay. I mean, but obviously it got better.
So from the very beginning, would they have their own keyboards for you to use, or did you have to bring your own to start off with? Or
Roy had, when I first started with him, he had a Yamaha CP70 Electric Grand and maybe a Rhodes, and he might have had a Prophet 5 that we used for strings, and maybe another Yamaha synth that we use, and I might have brought out an ARP Omni that I had at the time to do string parts on, and but most of it he pretty much always, he'd buy whatever keyboards we thought we needed.
And now would he change the setup a lot? Like, did you have to learn every song in the book, or would he usually just play the same set night after night? Or
it was pretty much the same tunes night after night. In the early '80s, he would do more longer shows, maybe an hour and a half. But by the mid '80s to the late '80s, or till he died in '88, the show was about 60 to 75 minutes, depending on the venue and
right.
the contract with the people he had it booked with. And
do you remember early on, like some artists that may have opened for Roy, or maybe you opened for someone else, or that would be worth mentioning? Some of those shows.
Yeah, I mean, I remember playing the grand opening of the Hard Rock Cafe in New Orleans, and the Neville Brothers opened for us.
Wow.
And I barely knew who the Neville Brothers were at that time. I think they were more of a New Orleans, well, they probably played around New Orleans, and but not too long after that, Aaron Neville started getting popular, and let's see, we were playing the Celebrity Theater in Anaheim. I think that was the spring of 1988. It was a in the round venue, and I didn't know it during the show. I didn't know till after the show, but George Harrison and Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne were at the show.
Nice.
That night, and they were trying to talk Roy into being in their band called the Traveling Wilburys. I don't know if they had decided to call it the Traveling Wilburys at that time. And I think Bob Dylan he was already in it.
But he wasn't there that night?
He wasn't there that night.
But everybody else from the band was?
Yeah. As soon as I walked off stage that night, it was, and it was one of those nights, it was kind of magical. The place was packed. The sound was just awesome. Roy was singing his butt off, and those guys were totally blown away. They could barely talk.
That's awesome.
They shook my hand
Right.
Said great show. They were shaking everybody's hand. And
so Jeff Lynne told you played a good show.
well, I think George Harrison. I remember George Harrison going, great show with his English accent.
Yeah, great show.
Great show.
Nice.
You passed the audition.
So, who would you? Anybody else that you can think of that?
Yeah, we played with the Beach Boys. It might have been that summer of '88. It's one summer, and we did a bunch of shows with them. But I think we were opening for them. It was kind of their
they might have a few
because we were using their equipment and we were doing 2 shows a day with them. Like we seemed like we were more up north, but it'd be like the equivalent of playing the Bridgestone Arena here in Nashville and like an afternoon thing, and then driving for 3 hours like to Knoxville and doing their like Stokely or
gotcha,
you know, and but we had to use their equipment. I used all their keyboards, and when of course they had 2 sets of PAs and
right,
all that stuff. But yeah, I mean there was we did Farm Aid 1 that was more, I remember Loretta Lynn and was on that show, and of course Willie Nelson was kind of he started that thing, but there was a bunch of different people. I mean, nobody was necessarily opening for anybody else. I mean, there was just
a lot of big talent,
And then we went over and did one of the last gigs I ever did with Roy was over in Antwerp, Belgium, the Diamond European. It was the European Grammy Awards, called the Diamond Awards back then, and Bruce Hornsby and Bruce Hornsby and the Range. They were on that show. I think Phil Collins was on that show, but that wasn't really anybody opening for anybody. But
well, it's just any memorable shows or other folks that you've met that you can think of.
Country, or it was what was it called back then? Country Goes to Showtime aired a TV thing called Country Goes to England, but it was a country, or it was a bunch of festival dates over in Europe, and Roy was he was on there with a bunch of country artists. Jerry Lee Lewis might have been on it. People like Boxcar Willie and Don Williams would close the shows. Roy would be right before Don Williams, but Don would always come out and close those shows every night. But there was so many things like that I probably need to go back and.
Yeah, but even if people weren't on the show, if you were in town, other musicians would come out and just to see Roy, even if they weren't playing that night.
Yeah.
Like I know you met Billy Gibbons and Dusty Hill from ZZ Top when you played in Texas.
Yeah, that was at Rockefeller's in Houston. And I don't know if that place is still there, but it was a bank back in fact it got robbed by Bonnie and Clyde, and there was still bullet holes in the front of the building where they shot at it. But just about every time we played at Rockefeller's, we'd do 2 shows a night, and and those ZZ Top guys would be hanging out. If they weren't out playing, they'd be there.
Then you said you got to meet Michael Jackson once too somehow.
I don't think it was Michael Jackson.
Oh, well,
I don't remember that.
I'll edit this part out. Well, anything else you can think of during the Roy times? Anybody from the Stones? You said you almost got to open for the Stones, right?
Yeah, when we first started with Roy, in fact, when we first got the phone call, I remember Marshall says, and we're going to open for the Rolling Stones. That was, evidently, being talked about, and but it didn't happen. I don't know why, but it didn't happen. Oh, I remember doing some shows with the Oak Ridge Boys too, and we did. Jim Halsey was booking Roy back in those days, and booking the Oak Ridge Boys, and then we did a whole week at the Fox in St. Louis, the Fox Theater, and the Judds. I think they were coming on the scene at that time. They opened the show, and I think it was either Roy came on second, and then Lee Greenwood was, I guess he would be the third act. But it was the Judds, Roy Orbison, and Lee Greenwood for a whole week at the Fox.
And of course, you got to do Austin City Limits and Saturday Night Live, and tell us a little about that.
Austin City Limits was, I think at the time, we might have been one of the first bands to do a whole hour long show back in 82 or 83 when we did it. And that was, of course, in Austin, Texas, and in front of a live audience, and it still is. That show's been going on for how long?
Yeah, a long time. It was pretty. Was that before Saturday Night Live or after?
That was one of the first TV things I did with Roy. Well, they filmed us doing those international. Well, it's called It was International Country Music Festival, is what it was. And we Showtime played or taped that. They were taping every night, and they made I don't know if it was an hour and a half, 2 hour long show, and Roy was, I think they edited our part down to about 3 songs. They probably did everybody that wound up being on that. Chris Christopherson, I think, might have been on that. And let's see, Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, when was that?
The end of the season, 1987. And Dennis Hopper was the host that night, and they did a bunch of takeoffs from Dennis had recently been in a movie called Blue Velvet.
Oh yeah, David Lynch. Nice. So he was the host and Roy was the musical guest.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an amazing show.
They did a bunch of takeoffs from Blue Velvet that night.
Yeah, that's awesome. So did you get to meet any of the cast, or were they too busy?
Yeah. What was the guy's name that used to do the news back? Dennis Miller.
Yeah, Dennis Miller. Yeah, Weekend Update. Yeah. So you got to meet him. That's cool.
Victoria Jackson. Who's the church lady?
Dana Carvey.
Dana Carvey.
Nice. Was Mike Myers there too, or not yet? Or probably was. You may not have met him. But I'm sure a lot of those people seemed like they were fans of Roy, right? And especially Lorne Michaels.
Yeah,
I was a
because
big fan.
he came out during rehearsals because we had to get there 2 or 3 days early to. We didn't need to rehearse. I mean, we did need to sound check, and of course they needed to block their camera shots and know what camera was gonna be where
Yeah,
for
yeah.
whatever song. Let's see, we did three. Actually, Lorne Michaels came out. We had 2 songs planned, and he says, "Could we get you guys to do another song?" And I think we might have been one of the first bands to do 3 songs on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, that's cool.
And they brought in. I remember them bringing in all these Marshall stacks. I think I had the Marshall stack behind me, maybe. Um, we rented all this gear from SR just to bring it in for show. We didn't actually use it all.
Of course.
And but yeah, man, that was
But you also got to do, was it Jay Leno and then Joan Rivers, or?
yep. Jay Leno was coming in and subbing for Johnny Carson on Monday nights at that time. I think this would have been around 87, the spring of 87. And so we did, Roy and KD Lang had recently re-recorded Crying.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually got to play on that track in the studio when we started recording. Actually, we started working on that song up at Blue Jay Studios outside of Boston. And we were playing up there with Roy at the Club Casino in Hampton Beach. And there was 2 or 3 days we got up and drove over to Blue Jay Studios and worked on Crying. And so they finally got that finished up. I think it wound up over in Vancouver and Los Angeles and Nashville, and David Briggs wound up putting some keyboard parts on it. He changed they decided they wanted a different string part because we'd slowed it down. They had me play the string parts I was playing with Roy live, but then they decided since we'd slowed it down that they wanted a different string part. So I think they might have kept some of my piano parts, but they so we did Crying with Roy and KD Lang, and we also had John Jorgensen and Steve Duncan from the Desert Rose Band playing with us on that show, and Don Was was playing keyboards and some harmonica maybe, and we only had maybe 3 of us from Roy's regular band,
Right.
or maybe 4 of us. We didn't have our background singers.
And Don would go on to produce a record that was made after Roy had passed away. I guess they had worked on right before he died. So I know you had mentioned some other like miscellaneous kind of stuff outside of Roy, like I know Tommy Two Tone audition and playing for Vince Gill and playing a session for Jerry Reed. So when would that stuff? When would that have been?
Tommy Two Tone, Vince Gill. Let's see, Vince would have happened before because Vince was opening some shows for Roy. Some of the last shows we did back in 1988. And he would just come out and play acoustic guitar. He didn't have a band, and so he started hanging out with us because he opened several shows for Roy, and he he wound up riding the bus with us because we didn't have that far to go. We were playing a bunch of in the round venues up in the Northeast, and I guess at the end of that tour, he asked me if I would like to go play some dates with him and Rusty Young on steel, and what was the drummer's name? Billy
Thomas.
And what was the bass player's name? It was this Vince, Billy Thomas, Rusty on steel, me on keyboards.
So when would this have been?
This was
What year?
the fall after Labor Day of 1988.
And so when did you audition for Tommy Two-Tone?
That was after Roy died, I think. 89, 90, 91, something like that. I think I still had a beard.
Same with Jerry Reed then as well?
But Tommy Two-Tone said that he didn't want another guy in the band with a beard. So that's why I didn't get the gig.
Couldn't you have just shaved?
If I'd have known.
So what about Jerry Reed? When would that have been?
That was 10 years ago or so. He called me up out of the blue. He'd heard something.
Oh, so that wasn't that long ago then?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, Jerry Reed was... and that was the one and only time I ever did anything with him.
So that would have been in the 2000s?
Yeah.
Gotcha. What was that like?
We just went in and worked on one song that day. I didn't know what we were going to do. He just asked me if I could make a session, and I was able to, wasn't booked that day, so I show up at, I think it was Hummingbird, and so it seemed like David Hungate was supposed to, he was leader on that, and he was late getting there, so Jerry hands me a piece of paper. He says, "Here, boy, chart this song out," and he starts playing guitar. So I'm charting it, and then by the time we got the chart together, Hungate showed up, and we were actually replacing tracks on a song they'd already recorded. And I think he kept Eddie Bear's drum track and replaced me or whoever had been playing piano. Pete Wade was there on steel, David Hungate on bass, Brent Mason on guitar, and that was the first time Brent had ever done anything with him.
Really?
At that time.
Wow. So you were among some country guitar royalty.
Brent,
that was as good as it gets, pretty much.
Brent Mason, he's it's probably incredible how many gold records he's played on during his career.
Yeah. So okay, that was after Roy passed away. So that other stuff you were trying to cook up when Roy passed away, and obviously Roy's death was probably a big shock and probably pretty devastating, because you had been doing that for 8 years.
Yep.
How many dates would y'all do a year? Did it change like throughout the years, or was it pretty consistent, like dates?
The early 80s, it was 120, 30 dates a year.
That's a fair amount.
And then it was, because there was some tours. We went to Australia for almost 6 weeks, and that was a lot of play dates on that particular. That was probably the longest I was ever gone, especially out of the U.S. I went over to Europe several times and up to Canada several times with Orbison, but we were never gone. Some of the European, there might have been a couple 4 or 5 week European tours, But by, I don't know, 85 or 86, we weren't doing as many dates, maybe 40, 50 dates a year. But the money had gone up, and seems like we were making more money in the late 80s, but doing less dates. I think that was true for Roy and all the
because the Wilburys had come out and maybe resurrected because those guys validated him.
The Wilburys didn't really get going till after he died.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think they put out the first record before he died, so he may have been able to do some promotion.
Maybe.
Well, yeah, but
Or maybe I'm thinking about Roy's last album. That didn't come out till after.
Right. Yeah, that was the one I was talking about with Don Was. So, and then you got married, and Roy had passed away, and you got married and started kind of picking up more gigs around town. And so when did you start working for Opryland and the General Jackson and stuff like that?
Opryland would have been around Memorial Day of 1990 with a band called Tim Watson and Black Creek. It was a country, kind of a top 40 country band. Or we did, some of the latest country hits, and we did some older stuff like Devil Went Down to Georgia, and because Tim was a fiddle player, a fine fiddle player, and I did that with Tim for 90, 91, 92, 93, and 94. They decided they wanted to move me over to I think Phil Stegner decided he wanted to move me over to the General Jackson, to the Night Boat, and that was another top 40 country band. That was maybe even more top 40 at that time. And so I started doing the Night Boat, General Jackson, and started subbing on the Day Boat because they found out that they knew I was probably be available during the day more than I had been, and so the General Jackson became one of my main accounts from 94, 95, 96, 97. The park closed at the end of 97. Even though I was over there, I'd do shows in the park. I mainly sub shows in the park. I would go, but I was in the Halloween show in the Chevy Geo Theater. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that's probably my first memory. I think it had a pretty big impression on me just because I was probably about 3 years old.
Or 4.
3 or 4. It was the first Halloween that I remembered. And, the lead singer's Beetlejuice, and the guitar player's a witch doctor, and the drummer was on the biggest drum riser that I'd ever seen with like a mountain of skulls that blocked the riser, and he would do like a madman kind of theatrical kind of performance in a straitjacket or something, if I remember right. And you guys would play like Welcome to My Nightmare by Alice Cooper, Highway to the Danger Zone, because you gave us the cassette. They gave you a cassette to work on the songs.
Or VHS.
Well, they gave you a cassette so you could work on the tunes.
Okay.
And then we would listen to that cassette. And then when we went to the show, and we didn't even have seats. We had to sit on a concrete slab in the back. And I remember being very scared.
There wasn't any place to sit?
Well, maybe we just didn't want to take it. I don't think there was, though. And then I remember being scarified. I just made a new word. I was electrified and scared and inspired all at the same time. It was pretty cool. It's definitely one of my first memories as a kid. It's kind of hard to come down from that, you know.
Sean Pody was the Mummy.
Yeah, okay, yeah, and you were like an Undertaker.
I was the Undertaker.
Yeah.
We had to show up 2 hours before the gig even started just to get makeup.
Right.
Because they'd put this white base of. If I'd have known it was going to be all that makeup, I don't know if I would have done it or not.
It was. I mean, but like looking back on it now, it was definitely a very to us or to my brother and I. At least I don't know if my sister is old enough to remember, but yeah,
Jenna probably wouldn't remember.
That was the coolest thing I had ever seen. I thought that was amazing. So when would the
well, at the time the Chevy Geo was a state of the art amphitheater.
Yeah.
I mean it was getting back then. It was getting the Vince Gills and the Diamond Rios and all the major country artists were coming in there and performing, doing shows there mostly night, evening, probably some afternoon matinees and evening shows, and back in those days.
Yeah, and like I know also right before or right after Roy passed away, you and Bucky did the WCW show.
That's right.
And tell us a little about that experience.
Okay, we're going back in time now. No, we're just going back to around 1989 or 90. So I got called by Bucky Barrett to Turbo, would you be interested in doing this rock and roll wrestling band thing? And so I guess at the time I was maybe Opryland. It could have been off season during Opryland or something. No, or maybe I wasn't working at Opryland yet, because this would have been was it 89 or 90?
I don't remember. It's somewhere in there.
Anyway, actually I found a Tough Guys VHS at my dad's house the other day.
Well,
I should have brought it.
Yeah.
Because it might have more footage on it than what we've seen on.
That was your official promo video.
Well, there might be more. There might be the whole TV show, which I'm not sure we saw on the YouTube.
Did you guys rehearse that with Cactus Jack Mick Foley before like the taping, or did they just talk about it like backstage before it happened?
I think our drummer and Mick Foley kind of talked through some things, and maybe Bucky, we might have rehearsed that one song where the Cactus Jack was chasing Bucky around the wrestling ring and holding his ears and that's too loud.
Yeah. So before we go too much further into the 2000s, is there any other notable things from the 80s and 90s that we're forgetting?
Probably.
So when does the Blue Tones start?
That started in the early 90s. It was actually the Nashville Rock and Soul Review. So that would have been Dave Nuding was the drummer, and he started it. And we had Lance Martin on bass, and Jeff Jordan on guitar, and me on keyboards, Michelle Orlandi on vocals, and what was our sax player's name? Chad?
Oh, okay.
I can't remember Chad's last name right now. Sorry, Chad.
So that became kind of like once all your kids had been born, that became probably one of your
around the mid-90s it became the Nashville Blue Tones. mid to late 90s.
But you would still do session work from time to time and indirectly work with people. Like, you would cut demos that other people would sing on, like Carrie Underwood sang on one of the demos that you did overdubs on when she was, 13?
Yeah.
And then...
That was at Jackie Cook Song Cellar. At that time, he was over on Music Row. He might have been in the basement of the National Songwriter Association at that time. Or he could have moved. Maybe he was over there across from Studio 19, the old Studio 19. But yeah, I mean, I've been doing session work here in Nashville since Dad's quartet came. And
so since you were a freshman in high school?
Well, that was more...
When you started, so maybe you were...
I was 15 or 16 when I first recorded it. Ray Stevens Sound Lab was my first studio, Nashville studio.
Yeah. Tell us about some other studios. I know that you got to play at Clement Vision as well with Cowboy Jack Clement's place.
Jack Clement thought he used to call me John.
Oh, like because you look like John Prine.
That's what he thought.
Right. Well, I know.
Do I look like John Prine now?
A lot of people said that you look like John Prine, but maybe now that you're growing the beard, not so much. But you do kind of look a little bit like Michael McDonald, and I know that you got to play with him for something for, was it for Apple?
It was this.
It was a benefit concert.
Yep. Kai Jurgensen over at Lipscomb. Dobie Gray, Bruce Chanel, Dennis Yost, Ray Peterson, Dickie Lee, Buzz Kaysen, Gene Hughes, Sonny Curtis, Troy Shondell, Steve Cropper, Clifford Curry, Michael McDonald.
And they just hired you to play with Michael McDonald?
I was playing with Steve Gerald and the Sons of the Beach. And the keyboard player had hurt his one of his hands, his right hand, or maybe his left hand. So he was still playing, but he couldn't play what he needed to.
Gotcha.
So they hired me to come in and...
So did you not do something with, was it M Audio or Apple or something with Michael McDonald at Lipscomb? Or was that with someone else?
We did a Apple. Yeah, we were demonstrating GarageBand, but that wasn't Michael McDonald.
Oh, okay.
Is that what you're thinking about?
Yeah, I was probably just mixing those together.
We did it was like a NAMM show, a little NAMM show at Vanderbilt for Apple, and we were demonstrating GarageBand. They had me set up with an M Audio keyboard and an iMac and, the latest GarageBand, piano and Rhodes electric piano, maybe some strings and organs, and Tom Rohde was playing what was the drum controller?
Oh, the Drumitar.
Drumitar.
Yeah.
He had one of those. So he was triggering a lot of percussion sounds. Bob Mader was playing, actually he was playing acoustic drums. He was probably the only guy there that wasn't playing any garage band. We were all doing garage band sounds, and Bucky Barrett had a guess there was a guitar amp simulator with effects that he was running through, and Roy Vogt had the bass simulator that he was playing through, and so we're just jamming. I don't know that we had anything planned. We just would start playing, and that was kind of an all day thing at Vanderbilt. But that was the Apple thing. You're thinking M Audio.
Yeah. And I know that you would do some one-off gigs, like some CMA Festival country legend shows and stuff like that. Is that where you played with Lil Jimmy Dickens, or was that somewhere else?
Lil Jimmy was down in Florida with I'd actually gone down there with Jack Green's band at that time, and we wound up backing up Lil Jimmy Dickens, and Gene Shepard was on that show, and her husband Benny was playing with her that night. I think it was an afternoon matinee and an evening show, and I think it was just Jack Green or maybe I can't remember who opened the show. Maybe Gene Shepard and then Jack Green and then Little Jimmy Dickens might have been the order, or Jack Green might have closed the show. I can't remember now. But Benny was, who was married to Gene Shepard, was also Roy's bus driver.
That's always connected. I know you played with Conway Twitty's daughter for a little while as well. Was that after Roy had passed away as well, or was that that would have been during the off times, right?
Yeah, Roy was seemed like he was having some back problems, and so I wound up playing out at the 11th Frame in Hendersonville. I don't know how many, because we were playing 5 or 6 nights a week, and I don't know how many weeks I did it, maybe 6 weeks or something like that, maybe a couple months. I don't remember what year. It seemed like it was around the mid-'80s. But we, you know what? I could tell you a bunch of other people on that CMA thing.
Don't worry about it. So, you're doing all this stuff and, playing around town and playing in a wedding band, and then your kids are getting older, and then we're starting to get into music, and I'm getting about that age where I had a drum set and I was starting to sound all right, and you were making music with an artist who went by the name of Marshall Law, and he asked me if I'd bring my drums into take them out of my bedroom and put them next to the piano where you guys were working on a song, and that was the first time I remember playing any music with you, where I was playing the drums. And then probably the next time we did is my drum teacher, Harry Wilkinson, asked us to record to a cassette for a chart that he had made, and he wanted you to write a song, and so that would probably be the next time that we played together. And then we started playing together all the time at church. I started playing drums for a church service where we would get to play together, and I was probably 13 or 14, and I was playing, so I started learning like the Nashville number system. Stu Dorsey would make Nashville number system charts for us to play in church, and he would give me reference material, like for a jazz waltz, or he would give me, or tell me like, kind of like play like Don Henley from the Eagles or something like that. So that was really one of my first gigs, probably, even though I didn't get paid when I was like 13 or 14, but just, having things to learn outside of, because I was into rock and roll and punk rock and heavy metal and stuff like that even back then. So that I was trying to get my foot in the door just to play with you a little bit. And then I went off to college and did a bunch of other musical endeavors, and then we played together. Or another injury story where the guitar player I was playing with hurt his hand, and we asked you if you'd come out, and that was the first time that I was an adult and we played together. And that's kind of like what started my idea of like, well, maybe we should cut a record together, because obviously we hadn't rehearsed really. So I was like, well, we kind of had something, there where we could kind of come up with stuff and play off of each other and whatnot. But I was curious, what what does it feel like playing with somebody that you got to see grow up, or I guess your kid or whatever? How does that feel?
It feels great to be doing something with you. I didn't think for a long time, because you seemed like you were more into the heavy metal thing, which is more of a guitar thing, and I didn't ever see us. Well, I mean,
Right.
You'd be down here rehearsing with, and it was usually guitar and bass.
Right. Yeah, power trio
Well,
stuff.
a couple times you had had a keyboard player.
Yeah, we would use keys from time to time, but yeah. So, or tell us a little bit about just how it felt making a record with me and making a record with Mikey, and how that went down and how you felt about that.
Well, it was a lot of fun. Yeah, and we still need to maybe go back in, and I might still need to do a solo or a melody on one of the songs. We're still debating that, I guess. And but yeah, Mikey Allred. I don't know. He almost seems like one of the family too, because he's from Jamestown, and he went to school with my sister's two kids at York Institute.
Right.
And then he went on to MTSU and went through the RIM program.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, he's as good as anybody that there is.
Were you impressed with our knowledge of synthesizers and keyboard music, even though we're known for heavier rock and roll kind of stuff?
Well,
or avant-garde stuff, even, or experimental stuff.
I was kind of surprised, like when you wanted to use the Mellotron. He's got a Mellotron. Well, it's all software.
Right. But just trying to find sounds and take that kind of time to come up with something. And what did you think about the way I produced the record?
It's good. It's gonna be good. I think folks will.
Well, I didn't know what we would play. I would just try to talk to you about a memory that I had of us playing together, whether it be, the stories of you playing in England and going to Indian restaurants, or if it was the story of you playing for wrestling and Cactus Jack, or we, wrote a song thinking about your mom or my grandmother, and just trying to honor all the memories and experiences that we have together, and try to maybe express something that we can't necessarily do with words, but there's something that we can express with the music that we made. And
Or some of it's just, inside jokes even. It's not even all serious, Some of it's just Young Frankenstein and Monty Python and all kinds of other things that you showed me throughout the year. So, well, hopefully this won't be the last, and I appreciate it. And
when they were smaller, they'd come in every day after school, and they'd want to watch Young Frankenstein. Frau Bluka.
Well, thanks for watching. Check out the Turbo Sun record whenever it comes out, and we'll holler at you later.